Sunsoft has been publishing Famicom games for quite a while at this point. They've had their hits, they've had their good games, they've even had a few great games. But with Batman, they have their first masterpiece. And I do mean first. From this point on, there's very few missteps in Sunsoft's catalog. It is impossible to understate how big the 1989 Batman movie was. The top-grossing film of all time, most likely due to a marketing blitz that covered everything with the bat symbol. Batmania hit Japan just as hard as it hit everywhere else. And even if the foreign markets hadn't become very important to those Japanese 8-bit game publishers, Batman would have been an obvious pick for a video game adaptation. Batman was, and remains, one of the most recognizable characters in the world. After being bitten by a radioactive bat, Bruce Banner takes it upon himself to clean up the mean streets of New York City. The story of the game vaguely follows the plotline of the film. You start out fighting crime in the streets, then move into a chemical plant, and then after a couple other environments that aren't in the film, you fight the Joker at a very tall cathedral. There are 15 stages in all, not counting the boss fights, and the stages tend to be pretty long. One of the first things that you're going to notice on them is that this is a game with a strong sense of visual design. I'd argue more than any other game before, Batman defines what 8-bit games can look like. Look at how objects are drawn, dithering into shadow. Terrain objects that move like gears are threats to you. Enemies are drawn more brightly so that they pop against the dark backgrounds. This is easily the best looking game on the Famicom so far. And to navigate these environments, Batman has a movement option we haven't seen before: the wall jump. Okay, you could cling to walls in Ninja Ryukenden and then jump off of them later, but the wall jump in Batman is different. You can't hang on a wall forever, you have to push off of it. The controls for this are simple. Just push in the direction of the wall and hit jump again. It feels natural. After you do it once or twice, you won't have any trouble climbing using that wall jump. Despite this flexibility, you can't just go straight up a wall though. You only have a very slight amount of air control while you jump, able to slow your movement just a little bit. That means you can't double back on a wall that you've just jumped off of. Instead, you need to jump back and forth between two surfaces to climb. And the game has a tendency to put some really nasty platforming challenges before you. Like here, you need to drop off the edge, then cling to the wall that you're falling from, and jump to the far side. Or here, where you have to jump immediately after you land, or you'll fall much deeper into the level. To take out enemies, Batman can punch them with his fist, or you can hit the start button to cycle through weapon options. Using a special weapon always takes up ammunition, though the amount varies with what you use. For just 1 point of ammunition, you could throw a batarang. This is by far the best choice of special weapon. It passes through objects including enemies, and that means it can hit enemies that are out of reach, and strike multiple times. It's cheap, efficient, does better damage than the other weapons, fires quickly, and the only downside is that its range isn't great. At the cost of 2 points a bullet, Batman pulls out a gun and starts shooting people. This is the game's biggest misstep with the license, since one of Batman's defining character traits is that he does not use guns. It's one of the things that people who don't know the character get wrong when they adapt Batman to another medium. The thought process seems to be Batman is an action hero, action heroes use guns, so Batman should have a gun. Well, in the case of the Famicom game, the gun is a bad choice anyways. It fires slowly, is more expensive, and does less damage, so only use it when you need to hit somebody who's standing in a place where you need to land. The absolutely worst item to fire are the split discs. These cost 3 points, do hardly any damage, and have the worst rate of fire. The only positive thing about them is that they can hit some enemies that are in positions that you can't easily hit with the other weapons. Of course, Batman's fists aren't a bad option. While they can take multiple hits to defeat an enemy, enemies that have been hit can't hurt you, and it's easy to take advantage of that with fast-moving enemies and punching them. Most of the enemies aren't too tough to defeat, but there are a few standouts. like these enormous leaping enemies that caused many people to just give up back in the day. The best strategy I found is just to use the Batarang, and that'll let you close in so that it'll jump over your head. These tanks are a bigger problem, especially when they're on the steps. The timing is tight, but you can jump over them, and sometimes you can even make them disappear by just backing up a little bit. The most useful enemies are these ceiling pods. They drop a near-continuous stream of robots, and all of the robots drop power-ups. So they're extremely useful for recovering your health and ammunition. All enemies drop an item, and there's only 3 possible drops. A heart to recover health, a bullet to recover ammunition, and a bee that gives you some bonus points. You can earn extra lives with the points, but the Famicom version of Batman is very generous with the continues, as you have an infinite number of them, and they send you back to the start of the stage that you died on, even if that was a boss. But that doesn't mean that Batman's an easy game. The level design tends to be extremely cruel, especially the vertical movement on later stages, where it's common for enemies to be placed exactly where you need to go, and in ways that you can't hit them until you're already jumping there. And since virtually all of the enemies take multiple hits, there's a lot of points in the game that you're just forced to take a blow. The boss designs are a bit weird too. They're either trivially simple patterns, or extremely difficult with a trick that you have to learn. For stages 1 and 3, the best solution was to just take them on directly. Rush in and throw batarangs at them. The bosses on stage 2 and 4 required a more measured approach. And by measured approach, I mean punching them at the right time. Batman's not a perfect game. The difficulty spikes really hard at some points due to the cruel level design. And you're probably going to want to stop and farm health a lot. But it's still an exceptional game. Even in Japan, where you might think that the license doesn't carry as much weight, Batman is remembered as one of the top Famicom games. I don't know if it would make my top 10, but it's really close.